Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Donald Wallenfang. What a pleasure to be with you on this live stream entitled Soul Power, Investigating the Human Soul Through Metaphysics and Phenomenology. So, a great pleasure to be with you, and I just am excited about this live stream. It inaugurates some new things on the channel. You can see in the video description some new links, some new things going on, things you can do to help support the channel. And I'm going to keep building things out for this to be a resource hub for you and your development in philosophy and theology. So thank you in advance for your interest in the channel, any support you're able to lend. We have the chat open once again. We have new features, various things called super stickers, super chat items that just help support the channel. It is a great labor of love, live streaming Monday through Friday for an hour at a time. And so anyways you're able to help support the channel, we welcome that. And we'll keep growing it, keep improving our technology, our delivery, and our resources for you. So let me know along the way in the chat and in comments, things you'd like to see in terms of growth of the channel, and know that you're a very active participant and an active member of things. And so I'm so thankful to have you aboard and be present and to enjoy this content together. So in this live stream, as I've been doing for a while, continue to take commentary from my 2017 book, Human and Divine Being, a study on the theological anthropology of Edith Stein, and now really beginning an exploration of the human soul. Now that we've talked about spiritual being in relation to material being, now that we've talked about human vocation in general in terms of love and responsibility, we want to really zero in on the spiritual core of the human being, that is the soul. What is the human soul? What is your soul? What is my soul? And how is the soul related to the body to form the unity of the human nature? This is very exciting content, and Edith Stein is one who does so well to spend a lot of time contemplating the mystery of the human being in terms of body and soul, very well researched, well defined. And I just love to continue to think along with Edith Stein on these questions and to unpack what she delivers in her work to this day. Edith Stein, as you probably know, was a Carmelite nun, a Discalced Carmelite nun later on in her life, until her premature and tragic death, murdered in the concentration camp in Auschwitz in 1942, along with her sister Rosa, who also had converted to Catholicism and was a third order Discalced Carmelite. And so we follow the story of Edith Stein. She wrote a very beautiful autobiography entitled Life in a Jewish Family. And a main purpose of writing that work was because of the great persecution of the Jewish people during the time of World War II and the Nazi program, the Nazi eugenic program, which went after the Jewish people especially. And so she writes Life in a Jewish Family to show that Jewish people are human too, just as human as non-Jewish human beings. And it's a beautiful account of her upbringing, her childhood, her young adulthood. And it was a work she never finished, but we learn a lot from Edith Stein in her autobiography. And so that book is quoted here at times. But we're focused now especially on her main philosophical theological works, Potency and Act, as well as Finite and Eternal Being. Thinking with Edith Stein about the soul. So as a Carmelite nun, Carmelites are known for contemplating the human soul. We think of St. Teresa of Avila and her work called The Interior Castle. It's all about the human soul, all of these various spiritual dwelling places within the soul itself. The soul as God's paradise, Carmel, this paradise of God, this garden of God, God's heaven on earth. The Carmelites talk this way about the soul, and it's so beautiful and it's so true. And it would be a great tragedy for us to neglect the mystery of our souls and not to become even more acquainted with our souls, the spiritual core of our being. So Edith Stein helps us to do this. And we think along with her, and some intellectual heavy lifting is involved, but I do this commentary to help us all access what she's trying to say even better. And it's a wonderful task before us. So let's continue to think with Edith Stein about the soul as the form of the body, though she says the soul too bears in potentia properties. So the soul in relation to the body, it's primarily a form of act, of actuality. So I think of these metaphysical categories once again of act and potency, act in relation to potency. And how does this match up with the soul and the body? So we have to have, for a potency to be actualized, say something like learning. There has to be teaching, there has to be instruction, there has to be an actuality of sharing knowledge that serves in the actualizing of the potency to know something I didn't know before. So there has to be this progress from act to potency become actualized. In the case of the human being, we have the relationship between form and matter. Form is something of act, and potency, matter is something of potency. And so the form actualizes the matter to be a this or a that, to take this shape or that one. Again, whether we're talking about an elephant, a cactus, a sunfish, a human being, and the list goes on and on, and all of these various different kind of organisms, something like some geological kind of material is being shaped by predetermined forms that configure matter in certain ways using the basic building blocks, material building blocks of atoms, subatomic particles, elements, molecules. But to have a macro form that makes use of the micro matter, we have an actuality acting on the potency. All of the potential matter has to take this form or that form, this kind of being or that one. And it is form that is acting on it to make it what it is. The substance of a thing, we don't say, is protons, neutrons, electrons, and that defines it. The substance of a thing has to do with what is it. Yes, of course, this material being is made up of matter, and so is that one. But they're quite different kinds of being, having different natures, different properties, indeed different metaphysical substances, which we defines the whatness of a particular kind of being. And the act operating on the potency to make something what it is, make a being what it is, begins with form. Again, the relation between something like geometric shapes and material configurations of matter according to those geometric shapes, which are the forms in relation to the matter, the architecture in relation to the edifice, the construction. And so it is with all material things. A form goes before it to make it what it is. In the case of the human nature, the form is the soul, the spiritual soul, in relation to the material body. And in German, again, Stein is writing in German, we have the Seele in relation to the Körper, and together we have the soul making this Körper alive, a living body. Without the soul, we'd have a corpse. We don't have a living body, but the soul animates the matter and makes it a living body, makes it an alive human being. And so we want to coordinate what Edith Stein is saying here. The soul is primarily a metaphysical substance of form and act in relation to the metaphysical substance of the body as matter and potency. We have to coordinate these things very carefully, because oftentimes in these various material reductionisms that are prevalent in postmodernity, we give matter way too much credit than is due. And we treat the body as if it animates itself, configures itself. We treat involuntary matter and atoms as if they were voluntary, and they're simply not. They're completely docile, passive, and obedient to the operation of form, of spirit, of actuality on the potentiality of matter to participate in a whole wide variety of material kinds of being based on the forms shaping that matter. So we keep all this in mind as our guiding threads, thinking along with Edith Stein more about the human soul here. As a whole, the human person remains a mystery, never completely disclosed nor disclosable, since the self-revelation of the person as such is in a state of perpetual flux between potentiality and actuality over the course of time. So to become in the course of time is to move from potentiality to actuality by a prior acting on the potency and actualizing it. So this is to become, this is to change. And therefore, a human being, for instance, is never completely disclosed nor disclosable, because he or she is always becoming. Edith Stein writes in her book Potency and Act, quote, "What the person is, therefore, remains ever mysterious for him and for others. It is never completely disclosed nor disclosable. Never, that is, insofar as and as long as his being alternates between potentiality and actuality over time. Insofar as all that it is allows in principle for actualization in the flow of spiritual living, the person's entire core is in potency to his actualization. And spiritual actuality, conscious of itself, is its highest mode of being." End quote. So thinking about the highest mode of being of the soul is a very self-conscious, self-aware, intentional actualizing of the latent potencies within the soul and in the body through this ethical and charitable intentionality in relation to the world, in relation to the other person who faces me. This active intentionality, very self-conscious, very self-aware. I know that I'm doing this. I choose to do this. I desire to become a sincere gift of self for the other person. This kind of self-conscious, self-awareness of vocation, she says, is the highest mode of being of a personal spiritual creature. And while Stein understands the soul to be the actualizing principle of the body, the soul itself does not have the power to actualize what is potential in it. What is potential in the soul is bound to outside influences, so that the soul's own specific being can become actual only through an actual being that is not its own. End quote. So that's from Potency in Act 2, Edith Stein's book. So she's saying even within the human soul, there are all these potencies that remain to be actualized. And while the soul is the actualizing principle of the body that it's united with, the soul requires the influence of outside forces, especially persons, in order to form the soul. The soul also has its potencies, its spiritual potencies. And the soul, therefore, is a very vulnerable kind of being, kind of creature, because it's exposed. It's exposed to whatever influences come to it, and the soul could be very shaken by disturbing kinds of influences, and violent kinds of influences, and things that are very demeaning to the human person. And this is why we have to be careful with what we take in through our senses, and it comes to our soul and affects us in terms of videos and movies and music, and where we place ourselves in the world, that we can, the result of our environment can be peace or great disturbance. Edith Stein is getting at that in her work. As Jesus says in the Gospels, the eyes, for example, are a light to the body. And then if the eyes are full of light and goodness, so will the soul and body be permeated with this goodness. But if they're deprived of this goodness and exposed to darkness, then this darkness will pervade the soul and body too. So it's very important to think about these things and to recognize the sensitivity of the soul, and many passive facets of the soul, that the soul, its formation depends on these influences outside of itself that act upon it, making it what and who it is. The soul is bound above all, unfortunately, to pure personal actuality of spirit, namely God. As such, the soul is the power of self-formation, propelling the living body toward the actualization of its predetermined entelechy. Again, a word that Aristotle uses, so we could think more about this, what's meant by entelechy. If the soul is both the form of the body as well as the entelechy, even entelechy as act, entelechy, we have the word telos in this word, which means goal, purpose, or end. An end toward which something is acting, is growing, is developing. So, what's in the seed from the very beginning, let's say, of the rose bush, the seed contains the fully grown rose bush and the flowers and the thorns and everything in it. It's already there. As seed in potentia, only needing to be actualized over the course of time. And the same is true for the soul in relation to the body. The fully formed, perfected, the fullness of the human archetype is already there with the human soul that is acting on the body, continuing to form the body as spirit in relation to matter. And with outside influences, we have the development of the person toward a predetermined end. We would say, in terms of anatomy and physiology, the infant becoming child, the child becoming adolescent, the adolescent becoming adult. And the development of the human body, it's very obvious in terms of the material development, but there's a concomitant spiritual development meant to take place with the person, that we might say becomes skilled at a craft or educated in an art, things like this. We have so much potential to be actualized, but those potencies are all there at the inception of our being as body and soul. It has only to unfold over the course of time. So intellect is an important word. Aristotle talks about it, and it means the fully developed form or the fully developed archetype of a particular being, especially a living one, a biological organism. But in our case, a rational being, in addition to a simple living one biologically. And we have all these potencies that are meant to unfold over the course of time according to the predetermined entelechy that guides the formation all along the way from beginning to end. So we have what we're talking about here is both formal causality and final causality as the bookends of becoming, of human development, of rational development. And we have this moving from behind and from before the person to grant this gradual development, fulfillment of the form we call human. So the soul is bound to this divine providence of pure personal actuality of spirit, as well as to its divinely appointed form that is involved in the self-formation of the organism, propelling the living body toward the actualization of its predetermined entelechy. We read in Alistair MacIntyre's book on Edith Stein where he says, quote, "To have soul is to have certain kinds of power or potencies, just as to have a mind is to have certain kinds of power. To be a human psyche is to have the possibility of a centered self, a core self out of which the determinate powers develop," end quote. So Alistair MacIntyre's commentary on the work of Edith Stein and the potencies involved in the soul and the higher faculties of the soul, the intellect, for example, the memory, the will, the potencies to know the truth, and for the will to love and to be shaped by the good. For Stein, as for Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, the entelechy again refers to the inner form of a being that is shaped from within and directed toward a goal. The entelechy of an organism could be described as its inward capacity, an actuating impetus for self-determination according to the predetermined shape of its being, what Stein in Greek or in German calls Washaftigkeit, or in Greek Morphe. She writes further in Finite and Eternal Being and Potency and Act, quote, "But we should remember here that this substance or the person's spiritual core is entelechy. Its core has the task of constructing the entire organism of body and soul in a process of ongoing development. And this means not only progressively forming from within a given matter into which it is immersed, but also appropriating the matter it needs for its telos, which is the fully developed individual. This matter includes, first of all, the space-filling matter the body needs for its conservation and growth, but it also includes the matter to construct the soul, figuratively speaking. That is the means of education, of formation, of spiritual development, of development of the personality. It's not just a matter of configuring the oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, all these various molecules in a certain shape. We're also talking about the necessary spiritual matter, material, that we call the stuff of culture, the stuff of narrative, of meaning making, of teaching, of law, of instruction, that all of this is meant to shape the soul. And this we have in the liberal arts tradition, again, the quadrivium of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music, and the trivium of grammar, logic, or dialectic, and rhetoric. All of these things operating to shape a soul toward its full unfolding that is actually prescribed beforehand, planted as a germ of the human being at the moment of conception, as the telos implanted by divine providence in the entelechy, in the person's original core. So Stein says the individual unity of the life of the soul is conditioned on the one hand by the fact that the soul is entelechy, not only for the body, but also for itself. And we could say the entelechy of the spiritual soul is something like the virtuous life. It's not just the body getting bigger and more able in certain ways and fully developed anatomically and physiologically, but for a person to live in an ethical way is already there as the inherent entelechy of the human form, to become more and more virtuous as time goes on, to become more and more responsible, more and more loving. She says, I mean that the soul bears a telos in itself that its living strives after. Not only a kind of physical conation to preserve intact the integrity of the body, to be healthy, to be able and active, but also to promote the integrity and of the soul in terms of virtue, this moral conation, this moral striving. So we have a kind of natural conatus ascendi that involves the self-preservation of the body, of the living organism in terms of nutrition, hydration, rest, protection from the elements, all these things. But we also have a conation, conatus vivendi, or something like this, a conation of the fullness of life, which is the virtuous life, which is striving for happiness, which is striving for the common good, which is striving for a better term, beatitude, beatitude for the self, for the community. And this striving is the stuff of the spiritual soul, the soul that orders all of these material goods to serve the common good of humanity. And the fact, on this other hand, the fact that the soul constructs itself as an organism that is as a whole, wherein all the parts work together according to a fixed order of the body, of the organism. So both of these things the soul is involved with in terms of entelechy, the entelechy referring to the moral life or the virtuous life, striving for beatitude, doing good and avoiding evil, but also the entelechy of the physical life of the organism and the integration of all these parts for the good of the whole body, and not only of the individual, but also of the family, of the community, of the neighborhood, of the polis, of the city, of the world, at this point, the global village in which we live. So the soul is at work doing all these things. It has all these potencies to be actualized. And we find them actualized when we put ourselves at the feet of wise teachers, when we stand on the shoulders of giants, when we look back across human history and look to the wisdom of our ancestors, the wisdom of the reliable, the heroic prophets, sages, rabbis, uh, apostles, teachers. We look to these luminaries in history in order for our souls to develop to their full potential. We have to ask ourselves this question, on a daily basis. From whom am I taking instruction? What are the sources, the pedagogical sources of my formation, of my development? Do I expose my things that cause an arrested development in me, or perhaps even a deterioration of character, a deterioration of well-being? Do I expose myself to things that disturb my conscience, that are unprofitable, unbeneficial for the full formation and development of my personhood? And we can think about this, we can do a comparative analysis, even phenomenologically, between, I exposed myself to this and this is how it made me feel. I exposed myself to that and that's how it made me think and respond. So all these influences we have to really examine, we have to really consider. And it would be my hope that the influence of Edith Stein, of Catholic teaching, of other people like Thomas Aquinas, John Paul II, all of these tremendous thinkers of our recent past would help guide us as historical luminaries and cause our being to fully unfold and develop. So thank you for sharing the comments in the chat, the words of encouragement, the words of appreciation. And it's great to have you guys again on board and present and interested in the content and in the ability now to support the channel through we have the supers in the chat, the supers in the comment section. We have more links under this video and to various books on Amazon and even a Patreon page to help support the work of this channel. Indeed, it's university level content. This is exactly the stuff I would be teaching in university or seminary, but extending the efforts through these new platforms. And it's very exciting to get to do so. So if you're able to support the channel in any way, I hope to upgrade our microphones, our video cameras over time, and really keep building things out. And I'm also very interested to hear what you have to think in terms of any ways to enhance the programming in the channel. What more can we do? What other topics, other kinds of video programming, podcast programming. So thanks for being here. If we think about another example of an entelechy in the biological world, something like the entelechy of an oak tree. And where I am in this particular part of the world in the season of fall, it's a very beautiful time, and I just love taking in all the fall colors, the fall smells, the fall breezes. And lately I've been on walks out in the wilderness of nature, and I love coming across an oak tree because I know how strong they are. Thanks so much, Wither and Thither. Really appreciate your contribution and your fidelity to the channel. It means so much to me, and good things will happen when we work together for the common good. Really appreciate that a lot. And so I'll be walking out in nature, and uh, I'll come upon a beautiful oak tree. The leaves are changing colors, and the oak trees are very strong. Their fibers are very strong in relation to other kinds of trees. And I love to just grasp the branches of the oak tree and feel the strength in the tree and come close to the colorful leaves at this time of year and just take it in and praise God for it and contemplate the tree that God has made from nothing. You know, there was a time it didn't exist, but God first of all granted a form from nothing into being, and then He joined that spiritual form to this radical potency of matter and crafted this what we call an oak tree, even through the course of biological evolution and so on. But I love to come up close in person with these events of being in the natural order of creation because they help contemplate what Edith Stein is getting at here. So we can think about the entelechy of the oak tree that's already contained in its seed, as is the entelechy of the human being present at the fusion of paternal and maternal gametes in the form of the sui generis human soul. Every human soul is entirely unique. That is showcased by a material genetic code and all the cellular structures surrounding this code, thereby allowing the unique person's unfurling, unfolding. Stein, however, makes it clear that the process whereby the inbuilt potencies of the organism are actualized, especially in the case of personal beings, is not only a matter of the work of the entelechy, and shows, she writes again in her book, Potency and Act, quote, our attempt to understand the meaning of genus and species led us to ascribe a definite direction to the entelechy. This direction, however, is not one that determines what it forms down to the last detail, since the outcome, the fully determined what of the individuals is determined not only by the inbuilt entelechy, but also by the lower material forms and forces that it presupposes, the stuff involved in nutrition and hydration. Thank you so much, Gerard Mahela. Wow, very generous contributions. And I'm really thankful for the setup of YouTube with the supers and the different ways to support the channel, because this indeed is a labor of love. I've been at it for the past several months, since mid-June, and just building up the content, really showing this commitment to the live streams. And it's you guys that keep me motivated, keep me realizing that God is at work here. And it's a great privilege to get to know you across the world through this platform. So I'm very appreciative of your support. And it's going to go right back into enhancing what we're doing here on this platform for the sake of real solid philosophy and theology, ultimately rooted in Catholicism here, but willing to dialogue with every other and seek the truth together. So thank you so much for your support. It means a whole lot, and we'll keep up this good work. So get an admin so trolls can get booted out. Yeah, it takes some risk with opening the chat back up, and there are some things that happened in the history of the channel that surprised me a bit. And it's like I want to dialogue with everyone, and so I try to dialogue, but when I see that it's not possible with certain interlocutors, I have to modify the platform a bit. So right now this chat is being visible, but it's not being recorded. It won't be published with the video. And so there's these different pluses and minuses. But I think together we want to create, we want to create a safe and civil, healthy platform for all of us to engage and seek the truth together. So we're working on that. So I had the chat down for a while just to kind of rebound a bit from some things that infiltrated the chat, and so I'm watching it. There's the timeout feature if needed, but it feels very good when I know there's sincerity in everyone involved here in the conversation we're able to have. So I love your questions, your comments, how to improve it, and yeah, these things are ongoing. But the work of evangelization is real, and we're called to be salt, leaven, and light in the world. And to be able to do that through this platform of YouTube is a great gift. And to connect with you is a great gift. So thank you for your comments again and your support. So thinking more than with Edith Stein, that it's the nutrition, the hydration, these lower material forms that interact with the body and contribute to the unfolding of the entelechy. So the entelechy itself isn't this like automated thing from the inside out, but it depends on an interaction with the world, with the local environment, both for the soul and the body, for the human formation to take place, the development to take place. And Maria Montessori is very good in identifying these various planes of development over the course of time for the human being, the human person. There are several different kinds of planes of development, and they come in waves of intensity and consolidation. Every 6 years, roughly, 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, we have these waves of development, these planes of development, and especially the very young ages of the human beings, the infancy times, the toddler times, there needs to be a lot of care taken by the adult caregivers with the child, because the child has such an absorbent mind, as Montessori calls it, this language acquisition that's taking place, and really patterns of being we could say, these habits of being that are being integrated and established in the young child that will be there for the rest of their lives, for better or for worse. So this is the kind of thing Edith Stein is getting at too, and what she means by entelechy in relation to the environment of the person that the person is living in. There's an interplay there between entelechy and environment. So Stein says further, thus the individual peculiarity and the typical variations of the species are accidental outcomes from the standpoint of the entelechy, but from the standpoint of the eternal Logos, who is the eternal Word of the Father, who became flesh and we call Jesus, the eternally begotten Son of the Father, the Logos. From the standpoint of the Logos, all of these variations of the species that happen over the course of time are foreseen as possibility founded on the ordered interplay of the forces, end quote. This is one of my favorite quotes of Edith Stein, and I'm going to mark it again in my book because I think it is so incredibly good. What she's saying there goes back to something she said earlier on that we were reading in this book, where she writes about a unity of a totality of meaningful existence. In German, Sinn Ganzes. This unity of a totality of meaningful existence is disclosed over the course of time for us human beings if we're open to this self-disclosure of the unity of a totality of meaningful existence. This is why I continue to say we need to think toward the whole, to let the whole reveal itself to us. And what we discover in this thinking toward the whole is a perfect coherence of meaning, what Stein calls in German Sinn-Zusammenhang. Sinn-Zusammenhang. A perfect coherence of meaning that is all meanings tethered to the logos, the meaning-making principle of the universe. So if it stands to reason that there is being itself distinct from finite temporal beings, which it does stand to reason that that's the case, there's also the logos itself, reason itself. If there's any sense making, there's any rationality to be had for us finite creatures that are in a state of becoming, always moving between the no longer and the not yet, there has to be a ground of rationality. A ground of rationality that we call the Logos in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Logos who becomes flesh. As the Gospel of St. John begins, in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, and the Logos became flesh and made his dwelling among us. So everything, all meaning is tethered to the Logos, and the Logos we call divine providence foresees all the possibilities of the interaction according to all these inbuilt logical laws of nature, all this natural law that we experience even in the case of morality. And so from the standpoint of us creaturely observers, things may seem rather accidental, random, happenstance, chance. But from the purview of the Logos, all of this that happens in the universe is foreseen as providential possibilities founded on the ordered interplay of the forces of nature as creation in relation to the Logos. So thank you for these questions. I'm happy to respond. Sila, which of St. Edith Stein's writings is my personal favorite? Where would I recommend someone begin when exploring her works? Thanks so much for this question. I think to explore the works of Edith Stein, which get very thick and dense at times, yet we have to have a shallow point of entry. And so to get into her life and her works, what I would recommend is more of her spiritual writings. One of the best books is called Essays on Woman. Essays on Woman. It's a variety of her lectures she gave during the maturity of her teaching career, her intellectual development. So she had thought about a lot of things, researched a lot of things after she had completed her doctoral degree or dissertation. Essays on Woman is a good starting place. Another book, I would say, The Hidden Life, the English translation of some of her spiritual writings. So Essays on Woman, The Hidden Life. Her autobiography is very interesting. It's lengthy, even though it was unfinished, but that could help you to get to know her life better. One of my personal favorite biographies of Edith Stein, I'll grab it off the shelf. This one here by a Carmelite nun, German Carmelite nun, Waltraud Erbstreet. Edith Stein, a biography, the untold story of the philosopher and mystic who lost her life in the death camps of Auschwitz. So I very much would recommend this. It's not too long to get into the life of Stein, some of her main ideas, main events in her life. Another book I really like by Institute for Carmelite Studies, let me grab this. Also off the shelf, this little book, very thin, but very good. Edith Stein, edited by another Carmelite nun, Maria Amata Nair, Her Life in Photos and Documents. So in this book, you'll see, photos of her life and little captions, little vignettes. This is a tremendous resource to get to know the life of Edith Stein very well. As well as this little not autobiography, but a biography. These two books together, plus Essays on Woman, The Hidden Life. And I would recommend the book I'm going through if you want to get into the main stuff of her philosophy, Human and Divine Being. This is why I take time to go through it through the live streams, because I think it's a great resource to really get into the thought world of Edith Stein. So I hope these recommendations you find helpful, and maybe I can recommend more as time goes on. So Wither and Thither, thank you for the question too. When Stein talked about this unity of the totality of meaningful existence, was she dialoguing with more divisive styles of contemporary philosophy prevalent in her time, or any particular individuals? Yes, I think Edith Stein was always had different philosophical others in mind, different interlocutors. One of the things that Husserl was combating all the time was called psychologism, and the rise of social and behavioral sciences at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century, when there is a neglect talking about the spiritual core of the person in terms of consciousness as the phenomenality of consciousness, which is spiritual. These eidetic objects, as Husserl talks about, are spiritual objects, immanent data of consciousness. We have a kind of sacramentality of experience with phenomenology, that this world gives itself to the human subject, in some ways through material objects, in some ways through sense data, but altogether getting at the essences of phenomena that are essentially spiritual in nature. And phenomenology, without going into a metaphysics of spirit in relation to matter, but still dealing definitely with what even Hegel begins to call phenomenology of spirit. And Husserl will use the language of spirit at times. And so when Stein is talking about this unity of the totality of meaningful existence, she's combating, along with Husserl, along with Wilhelm Dilthey, this material reductionism to the Naturwissenschaften, the natural sciences. And we have the same contest going on today in postmodernity, maybe even more fiercely, that we have to work to uphold the Geisteswissenschaften, the spiritual sciences in relation to the natural sciences. In other words, the humanities, the stuff of history, the stuff of philosophy, theology, literature, music, the arts, all of these human sciences that complement, that form this unity of the totality of meaningful existence with the study of material objects, the natural world, the stuff of chemistry, biology, physics, social behavioral sciences like psychology, sociology, anthropology, anatomy, physiology, also natural science, medicine, all of these things joined together. And the origin of the universities in Europe in the Middle Ages understood this holistic integration of all these fields of study. And the supreme fields of study, after mastering the liberal arts fields, were law, medicine, and theology. And philosophy implied as the handmaiden of the queen of all sciences, theology. And that's all true to this day, but it's being denied systemically, systematically through what's happening in university curriculum cutting and things, where the humanities are being amputated to this day. I've seen it many places. And so Edith Stein, in her time, was this advocate, this defense attorney for the unity of the totality of meaningful existence, which was this insistence on thinking toward the whole. So this we can think about. Yeah, so as mentioned, the Jewish tradition, the Jewish intellectual tradition, Moses Maimonides, for example, Thomas Aquinas is quoting in his work, we have a very thick awareness and intuition of being and the question of being. Yes, indeed, this totality of meaningful existence. And what we have in Judaism in terms of Torah and what's meant by Torah in relation to the one true God and this ethical monotheism has to do with the whole of reality, not wanting to confuse the part for the whole, not wanting to confuse the idol for the creator, and so on. And so Judaism, this ethical monotheism, is the roots and will remain the roots of this recognition of the unity of the totality of meaningful existence. And we have a further unfolding of this in Christianity with the Logos becoming flesh, who is Jesus. Jesus, the Jewish man, his Jewish mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary, and Joseph and all the apostles in the early church. But with Christianity, we have an opening to a church, an ecclesia, that includes both Jews and Gentiles. It's very inclusive. It's not monocultural, but it is multicultural by definition. Christianity, from its beginning, involves a translatable charisma, a message that is put in other languages and thereby becomes itself, just as the word became flesh. It's the process of enculturation. Through the process of enculturation, the church becomes herself around the world at this crossroads of cultures, which is a resemblance of the figure of the cross of Christ. So thank you for more comments. This providential possibility founded on the ordered interplay of the forces of nature. And so this comes up in efforts to combat top-down approaches to social science with more subject-centered or phenomenological social sciences. Yeah. So this is what is happening here in this world of metaphysics, this world of phenomenology. Another question, how can we foster unity in education by integrating the trivium and quadrivium into our teaching our children? This is a great question too. I think that we have to think about age-appropriate methods of teaching and learning. And what I like to draw the distinction between what I call a theology of childhood and a theology of adulthood. And they're not the same thing. So we don't want to superimpose on the child the world of the adult. And we need to recognize and respect the spiritual maturity of the child, the contemplative acumen of the child. And I think Maria Montessori, I can't think of a better practitioner of children's education than Maria Montessori when studied correctly, when applied correctly. And reading and studying the work of Maria Montessori, and in terms of faith formation, the work of Sofia Cavalletti, Gianna Gobi. Let me just grab another book off the shelf. This book by Sofia Cavalletti, who applied Montessori principles of teaching and learning with Catholic faith formation or Christian faith formation, The Religious Potential of the Child. This is a tremendous book. I really need to add links in the description after all these references. I'll keep trying to add links to point everyone to these great resources. But thinking about children's education, I recommend reading Religious Potential of the Child. And also, I just happen to have all these books on hand. The Absorbent Mind, Maria Montessori. These kinds of things, thinking about children's education, exploring this method of children's faith formation, catechesis of the Good Shepherd in the United States. There's an organization, CGS USA. They have a great website, great resources. And there's organizations, the Concilio International, Organization of Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, to get plugged into all these resources to serve children best. So I'll have a lot more to say about those topics hopefully in the future. Again, I thank you all for joining me in this live stream. I got another meeting to run to. But again, thank you for the supers from Whither and Thither, from Gerard. I really appreciate your support of the channel. Anyone else is welcome to support the channel through supers and future chats, or this one before I sign off, as well as the comment section. I have links in the video description to my Patreon page, and we're really trying to create a movement of my interior castle and sharing out these great resources. I want to be at the service of the gospel ultimately, and we need infrastructure, we need collaboration, we need this networking to get it off the ground to make it happen. So all these supporters, I'll be forever indebted to you, and we will continue to collaborate together. Thanks so much. Maybe I'll continue to think toward the whole, to pray from the heart, and to live as a witness. We'll see you in the next one.